Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. This is episode 5 of the Carbon Cycle and Energy Security unit over here on my channel. Today we're going to be looking at energy security, so stick around, subscribe down below, and I'll try and remember to link the rest of the playlists up here if you've missed them. There are loads of other revision units over on my channel, so go ahead, watch them. And without further ado, let's just get straight on into this. Keeping the lights on. The Earth, when viewed at night from space, is a wondrous sight. Some places are brightly lit, while others are in total darkness. The concentrations of light respond roughly with the consumption of fossil fuels to produce electricity. However, brightness doesn't always correspond with population size. For example, Madagascar lies east to Mozambique in the Indian Ocean. As a developing country, its population of some 23 million uses little energy. By contrast, Manhattan Island in New York City is home to 1.7 million people, each of whom consume more energy in a year than the average Madagascan will in a lifetime. Therefore, the bright areas tend to correlate with areas of high levels of economic development and show where energy consumption is greatest. Energy consumption. The amount of energy consumed depends on many things: lifestyle, climate, technology, availability, and need. Global consumption continues to rise as countries develop economically. There is a close correlation between GDP per capita and energy consumption. Energy consumption is expressed as units of energy in tonnes of oil equivalent per capita. Urban consumption. London. Over half of the world's people now live in cities. Cities consume 75% of the world's energy and produce 80% of its greenhouse gas emissions. For example, the area comprising the City of London generates 1.7 million tonnes of carbon per year, with its resident population averaging 1.8 tonnes of carbon per capita. London's energy demands are met through a web of national and international supply lines that involves key players. Rural consumption. Peru. By contrast, thanks to a national programme of solar panel installation, electricity was made available to 500,000 people in remote villages across Peru between 2006 and 2015. The energy now available in rural Peru charges phones, powers lights and TVs, and extends the working and studying day. The increased productivity allows extra processing of cereals, meat, cocoa and wood, helping to boost incomes and raise rural living standards. The increasing energy consumption, crucially from a sustainable source, is helping to bring sustainable development and a brighter future for Peru's villagers. The energy mix. No country on Earth depends on a single source for its energy. An energy mix is required, depending on what is available most easily or cheaply or effectively or securely. Primary and secondary energy sources. Primary energy sources are those which are consumed in their raw form. They include burning fossil fuels, so coal, oil and natural gas, nuclear energy, controlling uranium or plutonium to create heat via atomic reaction, and renewable sources, using solar, wind or wave energy. Primary sources can also be used to generate electricity, which is a secondary source. It flows through power lines and infrastructure to power homes and businesses. Domestic and overseas sources. Despite economic and population growth in the UK, the adoption of energy-saving technologies in, for example, home heating and vehicle engines resulted in the UK consuming less energy in 2015 than 1998. More of its energy also came from renewable sources. However, at the same time, declining domestic North Sea oil and gas reserves have made the UK increasingly dependent on imported energy. Because the UK now imports more energy than it produces domestically, the country has an energy deficit and is energy insecure. By contrast, countries with surplus energy such as Russia are energy secure. Renewable and non-renewable sources. There are many different sources of energy which can be classified as non-renewable or finite, such as coal, oil and gas. Exploitation of these stocks will eventually lead to their exhaustion. Traditionally, coal has been the major source for producing electricity. Renewable, such as solar, wind and wave power. These are continuous flows in nature which can constantly be reused. And recyclable. This is processed uranium and plutonium from nuclear power plants and heat recovery systems. In 2015, renewable sources, including onshore and offshore wind farms, solar farms, hydroelectric dams and biomass, accounted for 25% of the UK's electricity generation. This was the first year in which renewable sources produced more UK electricity than coal did. Factors affecting energy consumption. The UK and Norway compared. A country's energy mix reflects a range of factors. In the past, energy consumption increased as economic development and standards of living rose. Meeting the increasing demand often meant exploiting more resources. These most readily accessible were often cheapest, and therefore made up the biggest component of the energy mix. Let's talk about the UK. Physical availability. During the 1970s, the UK depended heavily on domestic coal from Yorkshire, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, South Wales and North East England. It was also among global leaders in its nuclear technology from the 1950s to the 1970s, but lost momentum after the discovery of large reserves of North Sea oil and gas, whose increased use after the 1970s greatly altered the UK's energy mix. The cost. The North Sea reserves became a secure alternative to dependency on Middle Eastern oil, after prices there rose in the early 1970s. However, North Sea oil is expensive to extract, so if global prices fall, it becomes less viable. Stocks of North Sea oil and gas are also declining, which is forcing the UK to import more. Technology. There are 150 years worth of coal reserves left in the UK, but current technology and environmental policy make its extraction and use unrealistic and expensive. The UK's last deep coal mine closed in 2015. Although 80% of the UK's primary energy still comes from fossil fuels, the technology exists for clean coal, that is absorbing CO2 emissions, but coal has lost its political support. Political considerations. The increasing reliance on imported energy sources affects the UK's energy security, and this has become a political issue. However, public concern is also growing over new proposed fracking and nuclear sites. The privatisation of the UK's energy supply in the 1980s now means that overseas companies, such as France's EDF and Germany's E.ON, decide which energy sources are used to meet UK markets. They buy primary energy on international markets. Levels of economic development. The GDP per capita in 2015 for the UK was $41,200. The average energy use per capita was 2,752 kilograms of oil equivalent, and the average annual household energy cost was £1,300 in 2015. Environmental policies. In 2015, the UK committed to a 40% reduction in domestic greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, compared with 1990 levels. This intends to broaden its energy mix with renewable sources, especially wind, and more nuclear power. However, the UK also abandoned its Green Deal conservation and insulation schemes in 2015. In 2015, the UK's CO2 emissions, 7.13 tonnes per capita, down from a peak of 11.5 in 1980. Okay, now for Norway. Physical availability. Because Norway is mountainous, with steep valleys and plentiful rainfall, HEP is the natural energy choice. Much of the oil and natural gas in Norway's territorial waters is exported. Coal from Svalbard is also exported. Cost. Norsk Hydro runs over 600 HEP sites, which supply 97.5% of Norway's renewable electricity. HEP costs are low once capital investment is complete. However, the transfer of electricity from HEP production in remote regions to urban population centres and isolated settlements is expensive. Technology. Deepwater drilling enabled both Norway and the UK to develop North Sea oil and gas extraction. Political considerations. HEP has been used since 1907, and the Norwegian Water and Energy Directorate manages the nation's power supply. The Norwegian government has an interventionist approach, which prevents foreign companies from owning any primary energy source sites, waterfalls, mines and forests, for example. Royalties and taxes paid to the government from the sale of fossil fuels boost the standard of living through government spending. But profits also go to a sovereign wealth fund to prepare for a future without fossil fuels and an investment in environmentally sustainable projects. Level of economic development. The GDP per capita in 2015 was $61,500. The energy use per capita was 5,854 kilograms oil equivalent, and the average annual household energy cost is £2,400. In 2015, Norway committed to a 40% reduction in domestic greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 compared to 1990 levels. Norway is the third largest exporter of hydrocarbons and is expanding its output. Norway's policy for change was launched in 2016, with a domestic target of being carbon neutral by 2050. In 2015, Norway's CO2 emissions were 11.7 tonnes per capita, up from 11.6 tonnes in 1989. Energy players. Obtaining primary energy in the 21st century involves more than merely having abundant resources within easy reach. Some of the key players who have roles in securing energy pathways we will talk about now. It focuses on geopolitical issues involved in obtaining energy and problems related to energy pathways. Energy pathways, let's just define it. It describes the flow of energy between the producer and the consumer and how it reaches the consumer, such as pipeline, transmission lines, ship or rail. So energy TNCs. Their role is to explore, exploit and distribute energy resources. They own supply lines and invest in distribution and the processing of raw materials, as well as electricity production and transmission. They also respond to market conditions to secure profits for their shareholders. The old players, for example, were BP, Shell, Exxon and Mobil, whereas the new players are Petrobras, which is a Brazilian company, PetroChina Corp, Chinese, Reliance in India, Rosneft, Lukoil and Gazprom, which are all Russian. These are all in the top 20 of the global energy companies. OPEC. The Organisation of Petroleum Exporting Countries is a permanent international governmental organisation. Its members are oil-producing and exporting countries, like Saudi Arabia, where oil is their main and only export, and therefore is vital to social and economic well-being. Between them, OPEC producers control 81% of the world's oil reserves. OPEC's mission is to coordinate and unify the petroleum policies of its members, to ensure the stabilisation of oil markets in order to secure an efficient, economic and regular supply of petroleum to consumers, a steady income for producers, and a fair return for those investing in the industry. In the past, OPEC set oil production quotas to respond to economic conditions, boosting supplies when demand rose and reducing them when it fell. However, from 2012 to 2016, maintaining output at high levels kept oil prices low, possibly to compete with the USA's increased oil production from fracking, which caused a global collapse in oil prices. National governments. Their role is to meet international obligations, while securing energy supplies for the nation's present and future, as well as supporting the country's economic growth. And they also regulate the role of private companies and setting environmental priorities. EDF and China General Nuclear are two government-backed energy TNCs involved in developing nuclear power plants in the UK, such as Hinkley Point C. EU governments aim to fulfil CO2 emission targets and reduce fossil fuel dependency. Consumers. Consumers create demand. Purchasing choices are often based on price or cost issues. Petrol prices can be keenly competitive between supermarkets. Consumers have some power over oil companies through purchasing electric cars or installing solar panels to cut home energy costs. But until 2015, most solar panels and wind farms in the EU and the UK were only installed because of the large government subsidies on offer. The expansion of nuclear energy, as well as the extraction of oil and gas by fracking, are both controversial in the UK and across the EU. There have been widespread protests against both. And that is the end of episode 5. I hope you did learn something. Please do subscribe down below and I will see you same time, same place next week, Monday at 4:30 p.m. Bye guys.